This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels with Melissa Loggins for the first time. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. If you use coupon code Ghost, you can get 1 month free premium subscription. And so you can stop scrolling and start listening. We are a featured podcast on the news platform, and you'll be able to hear this, the audio version of this podcast on Newsly within a couple hours. And we'd like to thank you to coming on the show. You actually are owner of the Music Authority, right, with your husband?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, that's and you've also been involved with like NAM, which I'm a big synth head. I'm a musician myself. Fan Electric Ghost is a band, and I'm a producer. And the National Association of Music Merchants. You've been in the top 100 music stores in the world, right? Running since
Yes,
2021, right?
correct. For a number of years now, yes.
Yeah, I've always wanted, but then happened, and I was never able to kind of get that. Maybe now I could think about that again. But yeah, I'm a total synth head. So yeah, like music stores,
Awesome.
I'm always going to look for my Moogs, and because I'm a hardware guy, like I use Moogs and modular gear and like Junos and Yamahas and all that stuff. So you see the mic I got. So I'm a
Excellent.
kind of into the hardware. So yeah, it's cool to have stores to actually buy gear if you're more of an electronic musician that's in the box. Somebody using like Ableton, or they still have to buy audio interfaces, wires, other things. But I'm kind of old school with the buying bass guitars and like other things like hands-on instruments. But so how did you get into that? Maybe you can tell the story how that happened.
Um,
Becoming
way,
a
way, way
music
back
authority.
when I was young, I really wanted to own a performing arts school. That was how I got started. I got one of my internships for college was at a music store. It was a small family-owned music store, and so I worked there, and I learned a lot from them until I was given the opportunity back in 2002. I had a family come to me that they wanted to open a music store. So I helped them open it, and they kept it for about 2 years and decided that owning a music store wasn't for them. So they sold it to my husband and I. We were very, very young at the time, but we bought it, and we are on our about to finish up our 20 or start our 21st year here.
Oh, that's awesome. So that must be a lot of work to actually manage it. Is it a chain of stores or one store, or how does it how you set up?
We are one store. We specialize in retail repairs and lessons. I run the special events portion of the store, and I run the acoustic guitar lines. My husband handles
Hmm.
most of the rest of the gear in the repair shop. We see about 650 students a week in our location. I have 28 instructors that work for us, so we stay very,
Wow,
very, very busy. It
that's
takes
kind
myself and two
of
other.
like an old school started in music on a clarinet.
It's
Wow,
yes,
yeah.
except we specialize
I
more in
started on the clarinet.
and we do
Hmm.
lessons like clarinet. We specialize more in contemporary music. So if you go to our recitals, it's a lot of rock bands.
Hmm.
We have a rock band program that's very, very healthy.
Oh, just more like
Um,
that, like high school. Or
yes, yes, and we go down as young as we've got kids. I think our youngest bands right now have kids at the age of about 8 in them, and then all
oh
the way to
wait, so
adults.
you're not more geared. So you're not as geared toward like the music programs and or orchestra, jazz band and stuff. You're actually catering toward the kids who want to be in rock bands. So you're saying more
Absolutely.
contemporary, like rock oriented.
Absolutely. We
That's
do
kind
have
of cool
teachers
because the
who
focus, like I.
sorry,
Mhm.
we do have teachers who teach the classical instruments, but we don't specialize in that. We specialize in the more contemporary stuff because no one else was doing that. When we started, School of Rock didn't exist
Yeah,
yet.
tradition.
So we started doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm a child of the '70s, and traditional music stores before you had guitar centers and before you had some of these online stores, it was all like, clarinet, tuba, sax, you know, it was all geared toward the kids in music classes, right? So they would be, renting
Yes.
the clarinets, renting the tubas, renting the saxes, and providing lessons. That was all kind of like, well, you learn an orchestra, you learn to do the Christmas concert, you're doing stuff like that. Be marching band. Um, so you're totally more focused on contemporary. So that was like a niche right from the start. Did you decide that that's what you wanted to have, that kind of niche? What made you feel like you want to go that direction?
When we first started, we just wanted anything we could get to come in our doors and take lessons from us. So
Mhm.
it was that really wasn't a thought when we first started, but we had been in business for about 6 years. It was about 2006 or 2008 rather, just when the economy was about to tank on us,
Mm.
and we decided to streamline what we were doing a little bit and to make lessons like guitar lessons a little bit more like piano lessons where we have a curriculum that we follow and things like that. And as we went through that process, we realized we were competing with a lot of other locations who were doing the classical thing, but no
Mhm.
one was no one was doing the rock and roll
Rock.
thing. So when we were sort of revamping our program in 2008, that's when we came to that realization. And from that point forward, we really focused on how to build our rock programs.
So when you include rock, do you include like the basses and the guitars and the drum sets? Do you actually have like the synths and the keyboards and the organs and stage pianos and stuff like that too?
We do. Not a lot of our students are really into doing the synth thing or the stage piano thing, but we do encourage them, and we do have the equipment for them, so they're able to try that out and to practice with that and to be in the bands. And it
Mm.
ends up we end up with kids who really find they enjoy that, and then we just continue to encourage that. We do have a B3 that's in the store that they can play with, so
Mhm.
that's always fun is to put a kid in a classic rock band and then put them on that B3 and see what happens. They get
Yeah,
to
yeah.
learn some really cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah, having it like a Hammond B3. You got a Hammond B3
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a Moog guy, so I got a bunch of Moogs and a bunch of Junos and
yeah.
DX7s. It's like I'm a child of the '70s, so I kind of grew up with a new wave. And when you grew up with like watching like Joy Division, New Order, The Cure, all those bands, and Duran is like I started like, well, what are they using? Oh, they're using a DX7, they're using a Juno, they're using a Jupiter. And I went to,
Mhm.
looking for them. And I went went
Yeah,
to get the guitar center at the time. It's like, hey, do you guys have a Juno? And like, oh, it's like $1,000. I can't get that. But
yeah.
over time finding old ones and fixing them, and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, it's like the kids today are more, do you have kids who want to get into like the DJ side, the CDJs and all that stuff, or do you not, even get into that area with like the DJ
There are
equipment and
kids
and things like MPCs and stuff like that?
there are kids who do enjoy that. That's not something we necessarily handle. We do places that will recommend them to that they can learn that and they can buy that equipment, but that's sort of outside of our realm of what we're trying
That's
to
not what
work
you're.
with. But that's a whole
Hmm.
different set of talented skills that can be taught, and like I said, we have some kids
Yeah,
that
I
are
think the
pretty talented.
modular, it's like the Euro racks and the modular synths and learning CV and learning how sound design. That's a totally different like going to like Berkeley or something. So you're
Yes.
focused more on like the string rock instruments like bass guitars, all types of. So do you have different schools of thought with guitar? Like, are people into like heavy metal, rock, jazz? What type of areas do you focus on?
We focus predominantly on classic rock is our biggest biggest moneymaker. That's where we
Classic
sell the
rock
most,
genre.
and that's what most of the kids really
Mhm.
want to do. Most of our shows that we produce multiple shows a year where we put all the kids into bands and they get to play. That's mostly going to be classic rock, whether it's 60s, 70s, 80s, into the early
Mhm.
90s, that kind of stuff. Um, Country is just not in high demand, so we
Not
don't do
kicking.
a whole lot of that. And,
Mhm.
as for, like, current pop music, we do some more of that. When we can get the kids involved in the synth world, then it does tend to venture into
Get
the
a little
more
bit
current
more.
pop.
Yeah, the synths
Yeah,
will kind of get whether yeah, being a synthesis is like, you can if you have a Korg M1 or you have one of those Phantoms or the workstations, then you start to actually like composition. Because then, like, if somebody gets one of
right,
those workstations, then they can actually start to you could build a pop song. If you were on a
right.
Phantom or a Korg, Kronos, or any of those workstation synths, they kind of lend it to that kind of structure because you have the ability to do like a DAW right on the board, and then
Yeah,
you're building like the whole thing. You can just put the drums in the bass, and you can. And that's where my head's always been. I've been a composer, arranger, kind of synthesis. Where in my bands, I tended to write most of the stuff. I'm a keyboard player, piano player, arranger. I would write the chord patterns for the guitar players and the
sure.
bass parts and all that stuff. So it's kind of cool when you get kids to realize like the piano is a writing instrument, and
Yeah.
you can actually write for like the whole band once you
And
learn.
that does happen more and more because we do see more kids that wanna learn songwriting. So we're able to work with them on songwriting and work with them and through the process, and they do find that it becomes easier once they learn keys.
Yeah, the keys are just like the foundation to like opening up the songwriting craft beyond what you could just do on the guitar. Now that you can, I mean, the guitar is a writing instrument. I totally
Yes.
respect it. But piano is just like the way it's set up, you can write bass lines, you can do it on a guitar, but it's just that to be able to do them together and then actually start to see the combinations and then you can start to arrange at a level that, it's a songwriting kind of mindset. Um, so you yourself are a musician, right? So maybe I'll talk to you about like
Yeah.
when did you first get into music and when did you first decide you wanted to be in the world of music?
I really got involved music when I was about in middle school. Um, I sang in this, like, the elementary school choir, and I was like, "Yeah, this is okay." I sort of enjoyed it a little bit, I guess. And then a friend of mine gave me the cassette tapes. I'm gonna age myself, but gave me the cassette tapes to borrow for Phantom of the Opera, and I just fell in love, and I was like, "This
Wow.
is the coolest thing ever." And so I got involved in musical theater when I went to, middle school, and I stayed involved in the choir, and, I actually thought I was gonna grow up and be an attorney, is what I thought I was gonna do, until I got to be about a senior in high school, and I said, I really like this music thing, and I wanna stick with it." So that's how I ended up studying music and staying with music from then forward. I did go to
So have you
school to
st-
study music business. Oh, yep, go ahead.
mm.
I studied
So
I
have you
studied
still
music.
worked oh, okay. So but have you still worked as like a artist, like been working on your own songs or just like you do cover work or do cover bands or what type of music do you do today as your own like artist self?
Right now, I'm involved in 2 projects. I do sing in a church and a praise band. I actually sing in their classical choir as well as their praise band, so that keeps me
Mhm.
keeps me busy. We learn a lot of music every single week. And then, we have a band made up of staff members at Music Authority that I'm a part of. So it's mostly cover music is
Oh,
what
cool.
I'm doing. Um, I have a musical director who does write a lot of stuff. My writing skills musically have never been as good as I wanted them to be, so I write novels is what I write. That's where my writing comes out. But musically, I work on other people's music.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's it tends to be the it then people could be like a session player or they like to be a cover band, different kind of mind into the singer-songwriter space, when you can get into that, and that's where I tend to interview people on my show over the years have been primarily singer-songwriters, but I do find it really interesting that you're actually, word up is at some music store you pining over like a guitar or a keyboard or some equipment that they I really need that and I like I gotta find a way to get it. So
Yeah.
but you see like it's interesting that your store is a focus in teaching, which is interesting and it's teaching again that most I grew up with was always teaching the kids. Well, most kids will probably would not were not really into like their parents were kind of forcing them to go and they were like, "Well, we're just playing in the concert band, so we're not like channeling Led Zeppelin or trying to be Tom Petty or trying to do anything that was like cool. We were just like playing because that's what the parents wanted us to hear. Christmas concert, and we're just learning how to do that. Um, the finding that niche where you actually do something that the kids must be a lot more excited to actually play something that's like rock bands.
Oh
That's a
yeah.
totally
Yeah,
different.
you wanna keep a 15-year-old girl in voice lessons, teach her Paramore, and she's gonna stay forever. So it really does work, and by focusing on the lessons first, we're doing a service to our community because we're involving these kids in something that's good for them. But we are also creating lifelong musicians by giving them something fun to do. And we get a lot of adults too. We
Yeah,
have enough adults that we do an adult rock camp. So we do summer camps and we actually have one that's just for adults.
cool.
They come, they have a really good time. They play a bunch of classic rock music on the last day of camp and it's something that
The
helps
school
helps
rock for
them
real.
too. Yeah, it's something wild to see.
Well, I think it's a lot of kids probably, was one of those kids when you're an adult that like you were in school learning music, but it probably wasn't what you wanted to know, right? And
Yeah,
when they probably find you, like, wow, I learned to be, like that bar band. I can actually, get get my skills up that I could be, I could go in and get, because that's everybody's dream. I have a friend who's an attorney and he's always like picking up listers and telecasters and playing with his finds a bunch of other attorneys that I've continued to be like bar bands or cover bands, and they just
mhm,
it's just something that they really loved, and because it gives them something else to do besides being an attorney. So I think
yeah,
a lot of adults have that. If they ever had a music inclination, like being able to find like-minded people that actually want to play together 'cause it's
yeah,
like sports is a team. Like, if you're in a band, you learn how to actually connect, and some people don't value that, but it's cool when people you are giving people a skill set they can take into the rest of their lives, to learn an instrument and actually be passionate about it is something like
absolutely.
I've been doing it since I was, like, 14, been playing, and I'm 55, and I just never let it go. So
Yes,
I have
yes.
a testimony to like once you learn an instrument, you probably usually stick with it, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of kids end up playing things that they're not interested in. When I was first in college, I was a music education major, and then I changed to music business because I went to a big rock concert at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. So it was like one of those big all day concerts with like 13 different bands or something like that. And I remember the band Live was playing,
Mhm.
and I was pretty close to the stage, and I turned
Oh, I
around
know.
and I'm looking like 150,000 people singing along to Live, and all I could think to myself was, "Why am I forcing myself to teach Beethoven, which doesn't interest me, when this is happening? This is what I wanna be a part of."
Yeah, yeah.
And that was a big factor putting me on the path to where I am today, was that moment when I just knew I appreciate the teachers who teach in school, but this is not for me. This is for me. This
Mm.
rock experience is for
Yeah, it's
me.
interesting. Yeah, because what we had to do back in the 70s, like everybody I knew that was in my rock bands when I was like 14, 15, 16, they were in the school bands and they were like, they're kind of doing it because, that's what they were doing. But what they really loved is to come over my house and go into the basement and the garage. And we had our rock band, and we
Mhm.
were, down back in that day, we were like taking like, reel to reels and Fostex and Tascam 4 trackers, and we were writing songs. And it was because we were musicians in those, those bands, and we were learning a skill set. But we really like, yeah, we didn't like the songs we were playing in school, but we liked being musicians. And it kind of we went and drove and found our own way, found that niche where, bothering our parents in the basement and in the garage. But it's cool that you're actually giving a kid a place to go play and learn something that's like beyond that school curriculum.
Yes.
We found a way to do it, but we kind of just did it. But yeah, giving them a space to do that, probably makes the parents feel better than some kid playing in some basement.
Oh,
you
yes.
know,
Yes, and our parents get really involved in what we do. We have a PTO at our store, and they're called the Music Authority Roadies, and they come and they support the kids, and they support each other's kids, so it's more than about just my kid, it's about the group as a whole. It's a very
oh
collective
yeah,
fellowship kind of situation,
to help get them
and
get drummers to
oh, yeah.
practice.
Yeah, they love it because when their kids get involved in those group activities and they get involved in the bands, suddenly it's a lot more fun than just practicing in your room by yourself. And when it's more fun, they're more engaged and they're getting more out of their lessons and they're learning more and then they want to
Mhm.
do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it becomes a really fulfilling situation and community for the kids and the parents.
Yeah, it's an awesome like after school active kid athlete. But the discipline of being a musician is the same level of practice. You have to I've always said, when you're a musician, you're practicing like an athlete. It's a different skill set. Yeah, but it's actually a very positive experience if you put it into, that type of if you kind of make sure it's a positive experience, you make it it's a safe where kids are going in the wrong way. But the idea that you learn the instrument because you love music. Like I went and taught myself how to use synthesizers and to use bass guitar. I was so passionate about what I saw on MTV. Like I was the first generation probably to see it, and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
there's all these bands. And back when they actually had bands on MTV, not TV
Yeah,
show.
yeah,
And I'm
not
like,
like today.
wow, there's all these bands playing all this type of music. Yeah, and I was like, I want to do that. And we just kind of we kids like I'm going to be the bass player. I'm going to go be the drummer. And they went and bought the drum set, bought the bass guitars, and we were kind of like the kids who watched the Beatles. All kind of went made band that kind of thing. Where a lot of kids who watched MTV, we went and made bands because it was like wow, it's like the Beatles to us. You know.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I remember when MTV came on the air, and I do remember how much of an effect that had on music and what was going on in the world of music, and suddenly I remember being in high school, and I remember the first guy in my grade, he said he's gonna start a band, and I was like, "Who does that?" Like, that was outside the thought process of what was normal at the time, and now here I am, and encouraging all these kids to start bands.
Mhm. Yeah, it's weird because, like, I was like in 78, 79. This kind of transition from like progressive rock and disco into like punk, and then new wave happened, and then MTV
Mhm.
happened. So there was this music was like everywhere. And then, bands like Duran Duran and The Cure, and there was this big effect. They were, Prince was showing up, all these people. Madonna is like it was just this age of music was in everybody's face as young people. And you're seeing all
Yes.
these musicians from all these different areas. And we all got into it because we're just like, wow. And it was very diverse though. There was coming from a lot of different areas. There was like, you had the punk music, you had the new wave music, you had the funk music, you had guys like Prince and Michael Jackson, but you had, bands that, ended up you having bands like and you're like, wow, it was like all over the map. And I was as a kid, it's like I liked Guns N' Roses, I like Hendrix, I like Doors, I like everything. I was like I wasn't just stuck in one zone. I was like in every. So as a musician, we were able to have a lot of influences where we weren't just stuck in one area.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's any complaint I have right now is kids do have a tendency to get stuck in one spot, and they really stick there. I remember one student in particular that all he ever wanted to play was Metallica, nothing but Metallica. If it wasn't Metallica, he wasn't interested in playing it. And he was this wicked good little guitar player. And so he came to camp one summer, and we gave him, I think it was Separate Ways. We gave him a Journey song, and he came to camp second and he goes, "This is cool." And I'm like, "See,
The
there's
Journey
life
song,
outside of Metallica."
yeah. Oh, got it. You got it. You got it. Something else. Yeah, because to get some kid to like actually see the genius of like the Beach Boys, right? Yeah, like when I was
Yeah,
growing up, and I was like, oh, what are the Beach Boys? And then I listened to Pet Sounds, and then I'm like, wow, that's like Sergeant Pepper level stuff. And I always all these guys were just into surf music, and then I actually listened to it, and I was like, that listened to like Bob Dylan. I was listening to like uh uh I don't know, the Basement Tapes with the band. And then I started getting like, wow, I like mandolins. I like these like, people playing like strings, and these guys were playing all this Americana. That was to me was like that was like real kind of country. If you listen to like Bob Dylan and the band and like Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, that type of stuff, I was like, well, I like this kind of all outlaw Americana type of country music. Glenn Campbell. I was like, wow, I like that. Because I was like, my mom was from Morgantown, West Virginia, so she got me into a lot of that, like real. What I would I call it real country music. Like, yeah,
sure.
that stuff is awesome. And I guess the kids are not as much into listening to Glenn Campbell or going back and listening to Jennings or Johnny Cash at Full Prison or something. But that stuff to me is like it's foundational. It's like good stuff, It's like it's the same to me.
We sneak it in there. Like we do spring and fall shows where we any student in the store can sign up to be in it, and we put them in a band and we assign them a song, and we pick interesting themes, and we'll sneak in a Johnny Cash song every once in a while, or we'll sneak in like Tulsa Time, or we'll sneak in some of those pieces that they would never ever think of playing. And it's funny because they're always like, this is
Yeah,
stupid, and then as soon as you get them to learn the song, they're like, this is actually really really hard. Like, they don't
yeah,
realize how difficult it is until they start working on it, because if it's not diddly 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 on the guitar, these fast, heavy metal
yeah.
kind of runs, they just
Heavy
assume
metal
it's
runs.
easy, and they don't
Eddie,
realize.
yeah, like Eddie Van Halen.
Yes. Yeah, if it's not
Like
Van
everybody
Halen,
wants to
they
be
think
Eddie Van.
no, but if you wanna fry a kid's brain,
Or
you
everybody
give
want to
him,
listen.
like, reggae and tell him to play on the upbeat, and he's like, I can't what?" And it teaches them new skills. So we sneak them in, and they do learn new things. It's just it takes a little bit of effort.
One time I was trying to learn the weight from the band. And I was like, I just got into it. I was like, I love the structure of the way those songs are written because it kind of like have lost the idea like songs have an intro, they have like a fill one, fill two, melody one, melody two, choruses, like outros and structure, like theory and structure. And some people kind of just get into, well, I'm just going to do a lightning fast solo or I'm going to do super fast beats.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, what about the actual like elegance of listening to a Carpenter song and listening to like that structure of a real like love song of that like our Billy Joel song or somebody
Yeah.
is actually like a very dynamic songwriter, like early Bruce Springsteen stuff, and you're like, look at the level of what's going on with the writing. And I've always been a big uh, as a producer. I always like to show people. I'll go back and show stuff like from like Exile on Main Street with the Stones. Like, look at the way this song is structured
Mhm.
on like Yellow Brick Road album songs. And you're like, Bernie Taupin's lyrics and Elton's like piano lines, like it's genius. And it's like, sometimes you have to show them the older stuff to show them like you got to kind of learn some of this stuff to actually learn how to write.
Yes.
If you actually want to be a writer, if you just want to play, that's fine. But if you actually want to learn to write, you kind of need to learn some of the classics just to learn songwriting structure and theory.
Yes. I took some of my students when the Queen movie came out several years ago. I took some of my students to watch that movie, and they were
Oh
blown away
wow,
by
yeah,
the writing process. 'Cause they go into the writing process in that movie pretty well, and they were just blown away with, like, how do they think of these
yeah,
ideas? And I said, it's just thinking outside the
yeah. That
box. It's
band is
coming up with new
high level.
ways.
Like, yeah, I mean, if you listen to Bohemian Rhapsody, this the structure of it. It's a progressive. It's got movements like a classical song. It's actually got movements like classical music. And a lot of progressive rock bands, like I always get people into like listening to like the Peter Gabriel version of Genesis or Yes. If you want to really get into art rock and song structure, you go back and listen to a band like Yes, and the way they build their songs is like much like classical music. It's got movements. It's got polyrhythms. It's got a lot of stuff going on that's way more complicated than what is going on in most songs today. And and when you say that you think you can like most of them, say, whoa, it's like go back and figure out like what these guys were doing. Even like Pink Floyd, you listen to like Dark Side of the Moon, and you're like, wow, the level of writing that's
Yeah.
going on and the stuff is like you have to like take a little.
I remember when my husband and I were dating, he took me to a Yes concert, and I had never listened to Yes before, and I sat there through half of the concert going, "I do not understand what's going on. Please somebody explain to me this." And now I can really appreciate it. But I had to, like, understand what was happening to really get it.
Yeah. Sometimes they're not engaging their audience and being totally into the music. So, like, compared to a band like Zeppelin or The Who, they might not have been as good. They got so into just playing the music that they heard sometimes they turned their back to the audience and people were like, what are they doing for like 20 minutes? And, but it was about like the music and they weren't
Yeah,
about as much the performance of it as the actual music itself. And some people are like, well, it's a show. And I think that you get like get people like a bow he could present really cool stuff, and it was complicated, but knew how to do a show, and that's where you
yeah,
get the showman. And then it like depends on the degrees of music, like how far do you go with the show over the actual playing of the music. And I always like bands that have balance. And I thought Bowie had a good balance where he was into the theatrics, but he also was cared about the music.
yeah,
So then you have both.
yes, yeah. We,
Do you get into the kind of the you focus mostly on the music itself?
We try to focus a little bit on the theatrics of it. Young students, depending upon how much self-confidence they have, are a little difficult to direct in that manner, because they're very shy and they get on stage and they're a little afraid. But we do work on things like don't plant your feet. You're not a tree. Don't root yourself to the stage. Move around. Play to the audience. We teach the concept that the audience has five different areas and play to each one of the five areas as you perform. We do work on
Mhm.
things like singers don't just close your eyes. Make sure you're making eye contact with the audience. Drummers. We had a drum teacher for us who I miss terribly because he moved to Florida. Um, we're in Georgia, but he used to teach dynamic drumming where, he would show them how to add like stick twirls in, not to be obnoxious, but to make it more entertaining to
Oh yeah,
watch. And
just
he
yeah,
was a
the
great
theater. It's
performing
like
drummer.
yeah,
So we do teach that as much as we
yeah. It's
possibly
always
can.
awesome when you see that.
Yeah, and it's great.
I
Like
remember
I was
watching,
watching I was gonna say I was watching one of our students perform on Saturday night. We were playing at a pizza place, and two of our varsity level bands were playing. And I was watching this one student who used to be very quiet. He's a drummer, and he'd keep his head down and really focus on the drumming. And I was watching him look at the audience, and he was smiling, and he was looking at his bandmates, and it was just such development from where he was that it felt great to see.
that's cool. Yeah, I remember, watching Bonham, twirling, and like Keith Moon, with the Who, he was just such a dynamic drummer. It was just like it's like all of the Matt Mitchell from the experience. I was always very interested in the dynamics of the kind of stuff that they're kind of playing, like the age of the hard drummer or the super drummer, where you get like a Bonham or a Keith Moon or Mitch Mitchell and Ringo. Like they just drummers started getting these personalities that were equal to the lead, you know, guitar singer, player, or lead singer. They started becoming, where they weren't just in the background. There's a point, like there's early rock and roll, the drummers just in the back. They were never like pushed. In jazz they were known, but in rock it was like they were just in the back, and they never got to in the mid 70s. You start getting these like drummer as famous as the lead singer.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good to see the kids grow, and that
So you,
that grows their self-esteem, and it grows their confidence, and it gives them courage, and it'll help them later on when they're going to college and they're doing, speech class, and they have to stand in front of everybody and give a presentation and all that kind of stuff. That's what they're really learning through that experience. So there's more beyond just the music.
do you have like vocal coaches as some of your teachers to teach people, like, because the voice, when I always talk to people, like if you're primarily you're a singer, you don't play an instrument, the voice is equal to any instrument, is an instrument. And so do you have like
Mhm.
vocal coaches or people who focus with how you can project and really use your voice to the best of its ability?
Yes, I have a number of vocal coaches with us. I have some that specialize in musical theater for the kids who are really focused on musical theater, but I have the rest of them all work on pop style and how to project and how to be on stage. And we do teach all of our voice students to learn how to read music so that they're able to communicate with their bands. So if they go into band
Mm,
practice and they're playing a song and it's too low, they know enough to ask, well, what key are we in? Well, we're in the key of A. Well, can we move
mhm.
it up to the key of C and see if that works better for my voice? So they're able to communicate on that level. So that's something that we do
Yeah, that's
teach
always
all.
good.
That was always a frustrating thing for
That's
me
a
was
really
not
good
being.
skill because like once you like sometimes be able to do that.
Yeah.
A problem sometimes, like where if you can't communicate with the band, like sometimes like if you understand the music, it's they're like understands like what key you're in, or they understand like what timing you're in, what the progressions are. Is just so much easier when you're trying to create, like, if people they're all kind of are into the skill of being a musician. And sometimes the people are natural musicians, they go in but they might not know to ask certain things, those tools, so they can be better. And so I think over time, musicians that didn't know stuff, they learn it because they just do it, right? And then eventually they
Mhm.
start to pick it up, because if you're really passionate about it, you'll end up finding it anyway. But it's always cool to have a formal training because it makes it easy than having to from which eventually you learn from mistakes and you just you get there, but it's probably better if you can get there faster.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely better for the kids to get some of that up front, and a lot of them get frustrated and say, "Well, why do I have to learn to read music? I don't need to learn to read music. I just need to learn to read lyrics." And then when we explain to them, sometimes music's not keyed right, and sometimes you have to change things, and you need to be able to communicate with your band. They're like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." It's like we also teach all of our
Yeah, it'll put them
students
in
to
a
learn.
really good place if they really get.
Yeah, we try to teach all of our students to learn to read standard notation. So my drummers can communicate with my guitar players,
Mhm.
can communicate with my bass players to my keyboard players, and they all understand that we're playing a C chord instead of just numbers on a chart. So, tab is not something we see a lot of. We do
Yeah, it's
chord charts.
always
We do a lot of.
yeah, it's just to put you in a better position because if you decide you wanna get into it, and you wanna tour, and in the way bands are, drummers out, you swap members out. If you start working in a studio with a producer, they start swapping people in and out. And being able to
Mhm.
communicate and in the language of music, then it won't matter if it's like if you're kind of used to just, well, this is my buddy and these are the people I know just because but if you get out, you're gonna get different people and different times that the only language that's understood is like the real theory and the real deal. And so if it makes it that much easier to be able to direct where you want to be. If you want to be and like own your, you should know as much about it. I think that's the way it goes. Is like if you want to own the practice thing, you should try to learn as much about it as you can.
Yes, I have a student who's at a college that I'll remain nameless so he doesn't get called out later on it, but he goes to a college, and he goes for his instrument, and it's a predominantly music school that does contemporary music, and so he had to take lessons in all these other, instruments as well, and as he's taking these lessons in these other instruments, his teachers are all going, "I don't understand how you know how to read all of this music." And so it's actually saving him time and money in college because he learned it all with us first. And he's just some of the other instructors are just blown away with how vast his knowledge is because they're like, kids don't come in knowing this already. So I feel good about that.
Hmm. That's a really good thing because I mean, music is part of the creative of the culture today, and it's like music is so powerful and such a kind of heartfelt thing that people can take their individual creativity, and if you can take these kids and actually give them the training that's equal to what kids get in sports. Sports is always focused, and sometimes people forget that the level to be a musician is just to me is rigorous, and it can be a lifelong tool that a lot of people say, well, you can use sports to get into sales and a leader. But you can be a leader in music. You can use the ability to be able to communicate with a band to show leadership skills too. And so that's not the sports isn't the only avenue to go that way.
Yeah. I always like to use the analogy. I mean, how many parents, at least in our area, spend crazy amounts of money to try to train their child to be the next pitcher for the Atlanta Braves? That's one position, and they've got a limited number of people who play it, but there's an unlimited number of musicians in the world.
Yeah. There's so many things if you think about music, like there's sync licensing. Every movie needs music. Every independent film needs music. All the video games need music. All being a producer, like I get into doing scoring video games, doing ads, doing sync licensing. And whether or not you're a big household name, you can still do well if you put yourself into it and you're serious about learning the craft, you can find a way to actually to the fact that music is around everything. Almost everything you that's sold has some kind of music behind it. Everything
Yeah,
that you see out there in video form on any kind of device, there's music behind it. There's people who are writing that music, and you
yeah.
can get involved in that if you. It's cool that you're actually doing that for these kids to give them another set of skills that people underrate. I think they underrate the value of what music could be for the people's lives. It's cool.
Yes, yes. And you don't think about all the people making music who still make a living even though they're not household names. I mean, my husband is a guitar player. He plays mostly fraternities and bars in college towns, and nobody knows who he is unless you go to Sky Bar in Auburn, Atlanta, or Auburn, Georgia for Auburn, Alabama is what I'm trying to say. So unless you go to Sky Bar in Auburn, you probably don't know who he is. He plays there a lot, but we make our house payment with what he makes every month because he's dedicated to what he does. And that's what music does for us besides giving us a business and allowing us to inspire all these kids.
Mhm. Yeah, it just makes you feel good. I mean, as a musician, I just like I wake up in my Moog or I jump on my Juno, and I just feel something, and able to put it down, and having the ability, your emotions and your feelings, and put it into art is, I think that, like anybody, like if you're a photographer, you're a painter, you're a poet, the ability to be on an instrument and express yourself is like priceless. To be able to do that and have that kind of communication with something that is an extension of your kind of heart and soul. And I
Yeah.
really think when people get into it, and it's cool that you're teaching adults too, because it's not just, it's something you can always, you know, challenge yourself and learn. So if anybody's an adult out there and they're like, oh, I really always wanted to learn piano or I wanted to learn guitar, well, go take the step and find a store like Music Authority. You are, or if you're near Music Authority and you're in this range and you were thinking about it, it's actually a cool thing to do. And you'll probably get you'll probably be so surprised at the results in your life if you do what you wanted to do when you were kind of afraid to do it. I think people should, challenge themselves.
No, absolutely. I like to tell people that taking music lessons is cheaper than therapy, but just as effective if you use it the right way.
Yeah, you'll be surprised if you find yourself like it might. Sometimes you don't know. Like I always wanted to be a guitar player. Keys were what I could do. I did, and I was like, I was better at the keys. And somebody could find out they're better on the sax, or on the drums, or they're better on a mandolin, or better on a violin. Until you try it, you don't know. And so, you see which end feels right. You got to take that step to kind of take it out of your head, and then go to your favorite store and go to a place like Music Authority, and see, get into it as a passion because it is a kind of passionate thing once you find that relationship with an instrument that works for you, and it
Yes.
connects to you. And I just think there's nothing like it, and anybody that's not tried it, they should try it.
Yeah, and you don't ever know what's gonna connect. I have a mom who started taking lessons because her 2 sons were in lessons, and so she took lessons because she was already at the store, and she played her very first show last month and walked off that stage all smiles, like, had no idea that that was something that was even a part of her life, and she's just like, "When can I do it again?" It was so much fun for her, and she's like, "I never thought I'd play guitar, and I never
Yeah,
thought I'd get up and play in a band, but now I did, and I just all I can think about is when can I do it again?"
yeah, it just becomes it's a passion thing. Once you get into it, then you wonder why these players have why the keyboardists have all these guitar keyboards. Like, why do you have all these keyboards? Well, because they all sound different. They all do different things. He's like, man, this, Yamaha does that, my Moog does this. It's like, whoa, like, how can you explain that? It's like, well, you won't get it, but you won't know the difference in a Rickenbacker and a Les Paul and a Telecaster. Like, there's a reason why you might have all of them. Where you might want to have certain, so people are like, whoa, we'll get the guitar, but like if you're not a musician, you don't know, you don't get it. But yeah, I mean, once you get into it,
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's all about the flavor, and everything has a different flavor to it. Um, I'm a director. I conduct a choir, and I've done orchestras and stuff, and I have different batons that do different things. So I don't complain when my husband wants another guitar because I understand this one does something different than the one that he had plays now, and it becomes part of your passion.
yeah, just the color. Like if you're doing music, what you eventually find out if you don't get stuck in the same like plane, that you want different tones because they have different colors to the sound, right? And if you want a 12 string because it's gonna have this effect. Want to if you want to use like something more precise, like a Telecaster versus a Les Paul, then you got to be a more precise player, right? Because the Les Paul is more forgiving. If you're going to, if in terms of, the ability to play, types of synthesizers, if you want monophonic for leads, polyphonic to have these big pads, and people might not know the difference, but like once you get into it, like, oh, my lead synth might be a Moog, you know, because it can do really fat monophonic leads, but might be a Yamaha or a Roland, and there's a reason why you would have or be a B3 because you're trying to do this type of coloring and you want certain type of sound, and there's reasons why you would do it. And you song, you're like you never know what song's gonna need what. And when you start
Yes.
writing the songs, like, well, this needs a Hammond, this needs the Yamaha, and so you kind of go toward what it feels. And once you get into that creative process, then you're like, wow, then you get it. But until you get there, but it's a cool journey to get on. And I think it will, if for somebody that maybe didn't know what to do, and they're bored and they want to get more out of life, I think becoming a musician is a cool way to kind of really get into life and feel the passion. Like you said, that mom suddenly is happy and feeling a lot of passion that she probably never thought she was ever going to feel about music or a guitar.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, that's cool. Well, I'm glad you're there to do this and you're in this kind of teaching mode and a kind of non-traditional teaching mode, which is cool. They're thinking out the box. And people are lucky to have your store where it's, the area you're in. So I'd hope more people find out about it in this podcast. And it was great to have you on the show tonight. I think it's cool to have all different types of points of view. And we've never had somebody who owns a store on the show before, but I think it's a different perspective. And I love the kind of non-traditional teaching that you're doing, which I think it makes it more fun.
Thank you. It's definitely a calling, and it's a job that I love. I don't go to work ever. I just get to go play every day.
That's always awesome. And people know you can go to the Facebook page, facebook.com/music authority. We might have a better link later that we'll add to the podcast as we get it. And it will migrate to the mobile platforms later. By tomorrow, we'll be on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, a bunch of places. We'll send the audience. They can just listen whatever platform they're comfortable with because we're on a lot of different platforms. But thank you again for being on the Fam Electric Go Show. We appreciate it and hope you have a good night.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.